Good morning, and welcome this morning to our Finance Committee meeting. Oh, okay. All right, sorry, all right. We're not quite live yet. Are we now? All right, well, good morning to our Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we do have regrets from Councillor DeLong this morning. We're going to begin with a land acknowledgement that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Do we have any announcements, acknowledgements, or recognitions this morning? We do have a proclamation. Oh, we have. Are we okay? All right. We do have a proclamation by the mayor.
I do, and I also have a couple of things that I would like to acknowledge. So I'll do the proclamation first. This is Lyme Disease Month, and I think all of us who live in Lunenburg County know someone or have a family member or have experienced ourselves the impact of Lyme disease. And I will say that during COVID, I had more employees with Lyme disease than I had that got COVID during the 2 years when we were in COVID. I had 4 employees with Lyme and only 2 with COVID. So it just shows how rampant it is here. And it is a time when we need to be thinking about checking. And I think now, because our winters are milder, if you've got animals, you know that you need to check even during the winter months. Whereas Lyme disease is a serious illness caused by the bite of a black-legged tick infected with the bacterium Borrelia burgdorferi, and whereas black-legged ticks carrying a variety of diseases or illnesses can now be found in all parts of Nova Scotia, and whereas awareness, education, and practicing preventative measures such as daily tick checks and proper tick removal can help reduce your chances of contracting tick-borne diseases. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Elspeth McLean-Weil, on behalf of the Municipality of the District of Lunenburg, do hereby proclaim May 2025 as Lyme Disease Awareness Month. And I know that as a municipality, we do quite a bit of education work around this. So there will be notices and Facebook, social media posts around reminding people about this. And for all of those of you who, as councillors, are active in social media, it'd be a great post to continue to remind people of the precautions that should be taken and what to look for. And I think most of our pharmacies are very good at identifying ticks when, if you show up with one in a bottle, they'll be quick to tell you whether that's one you need to be concerned about. I would also like to mention a couple of other things. Sunday was International Firefighters Day, and I know that here at Council we are always wanting to recognize our fire service throughout our community and those that volunteer as firefighters in our community. And they do so much to keep us safe, not only in fighting fires, but in emergency situations. They are often the first people on site and the people we look to either open a fire station for comfort station, or we look to them for direction on managing emergency situations. So I wanted to recognize that. And the other thing I would like to mention is that yesterday, May 5th, marked an National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirited People, and known as Red Dress Day. This is a day that started a number of years ago, particularly led by the initiative of a Métis artist, Jamie Black, who created the Red Dress Project. And any of you who've traveled not only through Nova Scotia but across the country, you'll often see clotheslines with red dresses in areas where there's a large population of Indigenous people, or those that are working to recognize the challenges of Indigenous women and girls as far as violence goes. The report on the call for justice, the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, was produced a number of years ago, but only 2 of 231 calls for justice have been fully implemented. There are 115 of those calls that are in progress, but there are a number that have not been yet addressed. So when we have an opportunity to lobby for more action, I think we, as residents of a community that has an Indigenous population and as residents of our country where our First Nations people are still experiencing many injustices as far as policing and the justice system goes as it relates to this problem, we need to advocate for that. And I would suggest that if you're interested in reading more about this, there is a website from the Government of Canada that reports on the various calls that were reported in that national inquiry, and you can follow the work on those. So I encourage those of you who may be interested to have a look at that site. And that, I think, is it, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone in the gallery for public input, but I do want to mention to those that are listening and watching that public input is one of several opportunities for the public to engage with council. Residents are welcome to use the public input portion of the meeting to share their thoughts with council on municipal topics that are important to them. So hopefully some of you that are watching or listening would like to take that opportunity to do in the future. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I approve the agenda as circulated. And do we have any, do we need a vote?
No.
No, we don't need a vote for agenda.
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah, we do? Oh. Minutes, oh, okay, sorry about that. All those in favor of the agenda as circulated, please signify. Oh, I'm really behind, right? Sorry. Could I have someone, thank you very much, Councillor, Deputy Mayor Vino and Mayor McLean-Weil for seconding it. Now, can we have an approval of the agenda? Wonderful. Now it is approved. Thank you. And for the minutes, do we have any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, I can approve those as circulated. All right, is there any business arising from the minutes? No? Awesome. And we do have a presentation this morning. Josh McLean from Efficiency Nova Scotia, and I'll turn the time over to you, Josh.
Called Efficiency One. Most people know us as administering Efficiency Nova Scotia programs, and as Efficiency Nova Scotia, we have over 24 programs to help Nova Scotian households and Nova Scotian businesses reduce the amount of energy they use, to manage their energy, and to ultimately reduce their energy bills. Oh, it's not coming up. Okay.
Usually that means something's not plugged in.
It'll come up on the big screen there? Okay, cool.
We're just having a few technical difficulties.
April, can you tell it to stop sending and then start again?
So as Efficiency Nova Scotia, as I mentioned, we have just over 24 programs to help residents and businesses reduce the amount of energy they are using to manage their energy bills and to ultimately reduce the amount they're spending on their energy bills. A little bit later in this presentation, I'm going to focus on, I'll get into some of the programs that we have that are specific to reducing energy poverty and to addressing equity around energy. So first I'm going to start with what is energy poverty. Energy poverty is when an individual or a household struggles to pay their energy bills while at the same time maintaining a basic standard of living. So this can mean a lot of different things for different people. In some cases it means living in cold homes in the winter. In other cases it means making decisions between paying your energy bill or putting food on the table, potentially foregoing medications, and ultimately increasing a lot of stress for a lot of people in the province. Whether or not a household experiences energy poverty is dependent on three main variables. So there's the price of energy, how much energy you use, and how much money you have to spend on the energy that you're using in your home. The most common metric that's used to identify whether or not someone's experiencing energy poverty is that if a household is spending more than 6% of their take-home income, so their after-tax income, on home energy use, then they're deemed to be in energy poverty. Now, the 6% number comes from a study that was done about 7 or 8 years ago where it found that the average Canadian household was spending about 3% of their take-home income on home energy use. Therefore, if you're spending more than twice the average Canadian household, you're deemed to be in energy poverty. Other studies that look at across Canada jurisdictional scan have consistently shown that Atlantic Canada tends to have the highest levels of energy poverty in the country. In Nova Scotia, Efficiency One, we're pretty lucky in the sense that we have access to a lot of great data. So if you look at the three variables that influence whether or not someone's experiencing energy poverty, we have really good data on energy use, which is one of the three variables. So we've got access to most of the electricity account information we have access to the electricity account information for most of the households in Nova Scotia, so we know how much electricity people are using. We also have really good data on the non-electric energy use. So if you're using home heating oil or wood, propane, natural gas, we've done, over the course of more than a decade of existence, we've done thousands and thousands of home energy assessments and energy assessments on apartment buildings. So we have a really good understanding of the level of non-electric energy being used in the homes as well. So that's one of the three variables. The second one is income level. So at the postal code level in Nova Scotia, we have income data. So if you look at the first 3 digits of your postal code, we do have income data at that level of granularity. And then internally at Efficiency One, we've got a very good data scientist who's developed this tool where he's pulled together the data sets from the energy use, the information we have from the income levels across Nova Scotia, and then what we can then do is input the price of energy, which is the third variable. So we can input the price of electricity, the price of home heating oil, natural gas, propane, and wood. And what this tool does is we put this into this tool, and then it'll tell us across the province what are the different levels of energy poverty based on a certain postal code area. If you look at the province as a whole, over the last 3 years, the levels of energy poverty have ranged from 34%, which is where they're at today, up to 48%. That's a pretty big range in a relatively short amount of time. One of the main reasons for that range is that in late 2022, the price of home heating oil, which is what most people use to heat their homes, that was the highest it had ever been. So in November 2022, for example, if you happen to live in the Halifax area, you're spending almost $2.25 a liter for home heating oil, and it's about half that today. So accordingly, when energy becomes cheaper, the level of energy poverty drops. Likewise, over the last 3 years, we've actually done thousands and thousands of upgrades, and these are significant energy efficiency upgrades in homes and apartments all across the province that also helps reduce the level of energy poverty. So overall, this is a good trend that we're seeing in the fact that the level of energy poverty has been reduced in the past several years. However, this still means about a third of Nova Scotians are living in energy poverty. And that's over 160,000 households in the province that are having the likelihood of having a hard time paying their energy bills. If anyone's interested in more information and kind of doing a deeper dive on energy poverty and the situation of in Nova Scotia, we put out a paper about 1.5 years ago. It's called Energy Poverty and an Equitable Transition to a Net Zero Carbon Future. It kind of gets into more detail about what energy poverty is, the rates in Nova Scotia, and then it talks about our programs to help address it, and I'll get into those programs in a few minutes. The other thing this paper does, it also helps tell the story of what it actually means to be in energy poverty. So we went out and we talked to organizations that work with people that are experiencing hardships, and many of them have been experiencing energy poverty, and we've got these segments within the paper called Stories from the Community, and basically it's stories about people that have had a hard time struggling to pay their energy bills. So the good news, actually, one thing I will say about this paper as well, so one of the things that in doing this study and putting together this energy poverty tool to assess the situation better is that it actually allowed us, or it kind of gave us some additional insights. So for a fair number of years, we had programs that are specific to low-income Nova Scotians, helping them to reduce their energy use. This paper, as well as the research that we had done behind the paper, helped us realize that it's not just not just low-income Nova Scotians that are having a hard time paying their energy bills. It's also moderate-income Nova Scotians as well. The good news is that we've got 6 programs that are specific to addressing energy poverty and equity. So when I say that, as I mentioned earlier, we've got over 24 programs as Efficiency Nova Scotia. 6 of those are specifically for people with based on certain incomes or based on meeting equity criteria. And I'll get into a high-level overview of each of those programs. The first is our home warming program. This is a program that was established in 2007. That's actually before Efficiency Nova Scotia existed. This program is for low-income homeowners. So those are the 2 eligibility criteria, that you own the home and that you are below a certain income threshold. If you meet that criteria, you're eligible for the program. And at that point, we do a home energy assessment to consider the level of energy use that's being used in your home. And we then look at the upgrades that we can conduct to make your home more energy efficient. The typical upgrades that we do would be focusing on insulation and draft proofing. And in recent years, we were able to receive additional funds, which now allow us to put in heat pumps into these homes as well. So on average, we're spending more than $10,000 in home energy efficiency upgrades to the participants of this program on a per home basis. And these upgrades are done at no cost to the homeowner. So it's all free from the homeowner. Depending on how you're heating the home, if you're heating the home with electricity, they're saving roughly $850 a year on their energy bills after going through the program. If they're heating with other fuels such as oil, depending on the price of oil, you can be looking at average savings of around $1,700 a year after going through this program as well. The next program I'll talk about is our affordable multifamily housing program. So this is a program meant to help low-income renters. So the way the program works is that if you are a building owner and you offer rent below a certain level, then you're deemed to be eligible for this program. So we don't actually income test the renters within the building. It's if the rent is below a certain amount, the assumption is that that building is intended for people who would have a lower income. So for those buildings, we pay up to 80% in most cases to complete energy efficiency upgrades in the building. And on average, we're spending between $20,000 and $30,000 to upgrade the building in terms of the rebates that are available. For shelters and transition houses, we actually pay up to 100% of the cost of the energy efficiency upgrades. The types of upgrades that are done in this program are similar to home warming, so we do focus on heating systems, insulation, and in some cases, windows and doors as well. And the average savings of the buildings that go through this program are about $3,000 a year on their energy bills. The interesting thing about this program is that there is a stipulation that after receiving the funds to complete the upgrades, the building owner is not then allowed to increase rental rates over time. So they can increase them up to a certain amount, but they can't significantly increase the rental rates over time. And if they were to do that, then they need to pay back the rebates that were provided. The next two programs are specific to moderate income homes. So the first one is a top-up program which we have where we offer top-up rebates to our regular home energy assessment program. So in our regular home energy assessment program, Nova Scotian homeowners can get up to $5,000 to complete energy efficiency upgrades to their home. With the top-up rebates, you can now get up to $15,000 if you are a moderate income homeowner in that program. This is a relatively new offering, so it came out in 2023, and most people that go through the program take about a year to go through the program, so we're starting to get some good data coming in now. And we've been very happy actually with the level of uptake within that program. The next program is an oil to heat pump affordability program. So this is actually for moderate income homeowners. It's also for low income homeowners, but we tend to deliver it through our home warming program if you're low income. So for moderate income homeowners, you can apply to the program and you'll get up to $15,000 to help you either completely replace your oil heating system by putting in a heat pump, or to substitute the amount of oil, or to reduce the amount of oil you're using in your house by putting in mini split heat pumps. These funds can be used for things like upgrading your electrical panel, to put in a backup electric heating system if you need one, and also to remove your oil tank if you are going with a full transition from an oil heated home to a home that's heated by an electric heat pump with an electric backup system. This program's also been very popular, and it's funded by both the federal government and the provincial government, and we're getting a lot of uptake in that program as well. Finally, our two programs to address equity. In 2018, we began our Mi'kmaq Home Energy Efficiency Project. This project has the goal to enroll all homes in all the 13 Mi'kmaq communities across the province within 10 years, and we're on track to doing that, so we do expect this program to wrap up in about 2027. This program was established because the homes, the criteria for homes that go through our home warming program is that you have to be below a certain income and own the home. In many of the Mi'kmaq communities, the homes are actually owned by the band. So in that case, we weren't able to put them through our home warming program. So what we did is we had engaged with the representatives from the Mi'kmaq communities for quite some time, as well as other organizations, and helped develop a program that was specific to addressing their needs. And as I mentioned, we do plan to wrap this program up in about 2 years' time with the goal of enrolling all homes within the province in the 13 Mi'kmaq communities. The savings in the spending, are relatively close to what they are in the home warming program, and these savings are significant in terms of $750 if you're an electrically heated home, and around $1,300 if you're a non-electrically heated home. And finally is our African Nova Scotian Community Retrofit Pilot. This is a brand new pilot that we launched just late last year. We're actually working in 2 African Nova Scotian areas. So the first is the Preston Township, and the second is Guysborough. We're focusing on homes in those areas where where the homeowners have a low or moderate income, but we also help other homes in the area as well. This program is actually a little unique from our perspective in the sense that we're using a navigator approach where we have people hired at Efficiency Nova Scotia to really help people through all the steps of going through the programs and look at the different options and really help them navigate the options and go through the programs. So we're still in the early stages of this one, and we should have some results coming in a little bit later this year, but we are excited about the possibility for this program. With that, that concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate your time.
Are you open to having some questions?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yes.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. What, do you have a scale, a threshold dollar scale of what is low income and moderate income?
Yes, we do. It depends on the size of the household.
Okay.
So I can send that out afterwards. There's
Perfect.
basically a table that exists if you
Yep.
have one person in the household, 2 to 4 people.
Yep.
And we have the criteria for that, for those programs.
That'd be perfect, thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Smith?
Can you talk a bit more about your navigator services and, you know, if I have a resident who wants to access these services and English isn't their first language, are there, do you have help for folks in different languages?
Not officially. So we have, so for all Nova Scotians, we have internally, we have a team called Energy Solutions Advisors. So it's, if you were to email our generic email address or call our 1-800 number, that's who you're going to get access to at that point. I don't believe we have anyone who's officially designated to offer services in other languages. Depending on the language, we might have a staff person who is able to help, but it's not something that unfortunately we have as an official task or a possibility. Do you know what the language is by chance?
Korean,
Yeah, likely not. But,
yeah.
but I mean,
It just seems like if you're trying to reach, you know, immigrant communities, that this should be something that could be part of navigation services is finding solutions for, because these are very, like, the programs are very detailed and complex, and trying to explain them to someone in a second language whose first language is not English is challenging. And I imagine, you know, navigation services, I know in other places that they've been piloting different programs that are specifically geared towards immigrants. So I'd just be interested in the future in seeing some of those options.
yeah, it's a very good solution, and I know we would certainly do the best we can with the Energy Solutions Advisors we have, and but yeah, it's a very good option. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Hubely?
I went through the deck. What's the contact information for a resident that might want to take advantage of one of these programs?
So we do have a 1-800 number, and I don't, let's see if I. Yeah, sorry, I should have put that in the deck. That would have actually made a lot of sense. Yeah, we would have a 1-800 number and a typical, and like an info@efficiencyn.ca, yeah. I can provide that
Councillor
as well
Ro-
afterwards, along with that table of income levels, yeah.
Councillor Reinhardt?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I have a question about the oil to heat pump program.
Yes.
Because I have noticed there's a bit of a gap there with households who don't have oil but could still benefit from a heat pump. So like people who use primarily electric heat, which is quite expensive. So is there something that fills that gap, or?
Absolutely. So if you're a home owner and you've got, like, if you have electric baseboards, for example, or forced hot, not as common, but electric forced hot air furnace or electric boiler, absolutely there's rebates for people to put in heat pumps. So there's a couple of different options. If you're a low-income homeowner, then just go through our home warming program, and we can offer heat pumps through that program. If you're a moderate-income homeowner, our moderate-income top-ups that exist in our home energy assessment program have additional rebates for heat pumps there. And if you're a program that a homeowner above those income level thresholds, then our regular home energy assessment program provides rebates as well for heat pumps.
And would that apply to people who use wood as the primary heating? Okay, it doesn't matter, okay.
Yeah, the reason, I mean, that the reason there's a focus specifically on home heating oils, it came from both federal government and provincial government priorities to help really reduce those costs, as that is typically the most expensive, depending on the price of oil, can be the most expensive way to heat your home. And then there's the desire to transition out of the carbon-heavy oil into electricity.
Mayor McLean-Weil?
Yeah, thank you. My question's not necessarily directly related to the presentation, but it's to a better understanding of Efficiency Nova Scotia itself. Here in one of the slide decks, it says Efficiency 1, and then some says Efficiency Nova Scotia, and you describe yourself as a not-for-profit. Can you clarify what those different terms mean? And also, what is your source of funding, and how do you operate as a not-for-profit?
So excellent question. It is a little bit confusing. So I work for, and everyone that administers Efficiency Nova Scotia programs, we all work for a nonprofit organization called Efficiency One. Efficiency Nova Scotia is just a brand, so it's not actually a corporate entity. The brand Efficiency Nova Scotia is technically owned by the province, and we have a license to operate the Efficiency Nova Scotia programs as Efficiency One. So it's all through provincial legislation. So as Efficiency One, we administer Efficiency Nova Scotia programs. We also have a couple other areas of business. We run the Halifax Climate Investment, Innovation, and Impact Fund, which is a separate arm of business for Efficiency One, but most of our work is as Efficiency Nova Scotia. Efficiency Nova Scotia programs are funded by Nova Scotia Power ratepayers, by the provincial government, and also by the federal government. So a couple nuances to that. The Nova Scotia Power ratepayer funds are all through regulated activities. So we have to go to now the Nova Scotia Energy Board, but what used to be the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. We would go to them for a multi-year funding application. We would receive funding to administer Efficiency Nova Scotia programs addressing electricity use from Nova Scotia Power ratepayers. And then any of our programs, like our Oil to Heat Pump Affordability Program, for example, any programs that are specific to non-electric energy use, that funding comes from either the province or the federal government.
Deputy Mayor Eno?
Thank you. I have a question around the landlord multi-unit residential building. How many units would need to be in the unit? And you had mentioned that it would tie to those offering affordable rent.
Yes.
What would you consider affordable rent? And is it a cross-provincial number, or is it based on county? Because it's very different depending on what part of the province that you're in. So interested on how many units and what is considered affordable rent?
So typically, the buildings that would go through that would be 4 or more units. There are other options for buildings that have less than 4 units, but typically through that program, it would be 4 or more units. And similar to the low income and moderate income cutoffs, we actually have a table. If you're in this area of the province, here's the rent levels that would be considered. And I can send that around after as well.
That would be great. Thank you. Look forward to seeing that.
Councillor Smith?
Can you talk about what the wait times are like for some of these programs? I've heard from some residents that there's certain points where things seem to get held up. And is it around the home energy assessment, or is it in, what are you seeing as far as how long these programs take to complete?
So it'll depend by the program. I'd say the most popular program that people tend to apply for is the home warming program. That one would have a longer wait time because of a couple reasons. One is just getting into the program itself. So I would say in the early years of COVID and pre-COVID, we actually had a hard time getting people through that program. We were had a certain amount of money that we could spend on homes across the province each year, and we were doing a lot of outreach activities just to get people through the program. Shortly after COVID hit, when the energy prices spiked significantly, we had, I think it was 10,000 applications within a month or two, and we're doing about 1,800 homes a year. So in a very short period of time, the amount of people interested in participating in that program went up significantly. That increased the wait time to getting people in the program to begin with. The good news is that we had a lot of funding that was provided. I think it came about through 21 or 22, additional funding that was provided to help alleviate that gap. So we've been working through kind of a backlog of just getting into the program. And then since that time, we've also introduced heat pumps to the program. So whereas we would have had about a half a dozen contractors working across the province to do the upgrades, once we put in heat pumps, we started working with heat pump installers. So now we've got a list of over 42 heat pump installers to help put in heat pumps. So we've, because of those things, that there has been a bit longer wait time than normal to go through the programs, but we're working to address that.
Do you have like an average amount of wait time?
To go through the home warming program, it's from start to finish, you're probably looking at around 9 to 10 months. That would be the start to finish. But that will, I would flag, that will depend on what you're doing in the home. So if a home is just putting in a heat pump, for example, that wait time is significantly less. If you're looking to get insulation contractors, draft proofing, potentially other electrical work done in the home as well, the more contractors we have to bring in, the longer it takes to get the home done.
I also have a question. I appreciate your presentation today. I'm just wondering about the Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian projects. Is there a specific reason why you're just doing it within their designated communities? Because, you know, a lot don't live necessarily on band ground when it's Mi'kmaq, and there's a lot of African Nova Scotians throughout Nova Scotia. You know, I do realize that Preston and Guysborough is a large community, but also Argyll and Yarmouth and Shelburne and Queens counties also are very historically have African Nova Scotians that have settled there and continue to reside.
Absolutely. So I'll address the Mi'kmaq Home Energy Efficiency Project first. So that project was put together because people within those communities that didn't own their own home weren't able to participate in other programs. And the reason was that we needed sign-off to be able to agree to the upgrades that were being done in those buildings. So for those participants, for those situations where the band owns the home, that's why we put together the Mi'kmaq Home Energy Efficiency Project. For any other situation where there is a Mi'kmaq person that owned their own home, they can of course partake in our home warming program. So if they were below a certain income, they were obviously they would be able to partake in that program. They can participate in the moderate income programs and any other programs we would have as well. For the African Nova Scotian Communities retrofit, we're just piloting it right now. So the idea is that if the pilot goes well, we get good results and funding is available, then we would certainly wish to expand that to other parts of the province afterwards. But we did just want to focus on 2 different communities now to help kind of start small and hopefully expand it later.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Mayor McLean-Weil?
Again, not directly related to this, but more about the long-term strategy around energy usage in the province and how that fits in to your mandate as a not-for-profit funded by government and privates, well, all of us, I guess, through Nova Scotia Power. But what do you see as those strategic directions and measures of success in the community?
Yeah, so I mean, our mandate is to help people essentially reduce their energy bills, and they can do that by managing electricity use at a certain period of the time, or ideally reducing the amount of energy they use in the first place. So the more we can fulfill that mandate, the more kind of energy independence essentially we have, because people have more control over their energy bills and aren't spending as much. the less greenhouse gas emission reductions, or the less greenhouse gas emissions there are in total. So we, every year we have, it's called this an evaluation. So it's, excuse me, a third-party evaluator would come in, look at how we're doing with our programs, and we have assumptions within our programs to say, you know, if you're getting a home energy assessment, for example, we use a model to say how much energy you're using before the upgrades and after the upgrades. The third-party evaluator comes in, sometimes does a billing analysis to see if the energy savings that we had projected are actually being realized. So every year we do that, and we can quantify the level of energy being saved, and we can quantify the level of greenhouse gas emissions that have been reduced. And those are important because with our funders, we have targets around energy savings in terms of Nova Scotia Power be a certain amount of gigawatt hours that we have to reduce electricity use across homes and businesses every year. If it's with the province of Nova Scotia and the federal government, it's the level of gigajoules of non-electric energy savings. So we've got tied to our funding agreements our specific targets, and yeah, we basically aim to achieve those targets every year.
If I may, how are you doing?
Oh, good. So we've got, I mean, corporately, we have a scorecard every year that identifies specific priorities for the year, and the majority of our scorecard is making sure we meet targets, we do it safely with happy customers, and we do it on budget. So meeting the targets, for the most part, we're meeting those targets. There's one relatively new area, which is demand response, which is working with larger facilities to help essentially turn off equipment at peak periods, at periods of peak electricity demand. So we'll get a notification from Nova Scotia Power, for example, to say, tomorrow between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., we're anticipating a peak electricity load. So on our end, we have to work with larger facilities to say, and provide them with a pretty generous incentive to say, okay, we need you to shut down some of your equipment during this time. That one's a relatively new program for us. It's called the Electricity Demand Response, and we're in the third year of that, and we've learned a lot along the way, but we still need to go a little bit further to meet those specific targets.
If I may, are those commercial? Are you saying those are commercial
Those
entities?
particular ones are commercial. Those
So
are large commercial entities, yes.
They would be like a pulp mill, like at Port Hawkesbury, or?
Yeah, Port Hawkesbury is actually a bit of a side. They're exempt
But
from our
aren't they the largest user in the province?
They are, but they're exempt from, we're not allowed to offer them incentives through our program because they're so big and they have their own arrangement with Nova Scotia Power. But yeah, they're 10% of the load of the province. You're absolutely right.
Councillor Brooks.
Could you just help me understand how you do the calculations on greenhouse gas savings when you talk about non-electric use, when half of our electricity is produced with coke and coal in the province still? So how do you do that calculation?
So on the electricity side, it's essentially looking at what the emissions were from the most recent year that we have data available, which is provided by Nova Scotia Power. So it's effectively what's the tons per gigawatt hour of electricity use in the province. So for every gigawatt hour that we reduce electricity use, we can calculate the greenhouse gas emissions that are being saved from that. On the non-electric side, it really depends on what the fuel is. So if you're in a home heating with oil, there's a certain factor that would look at, I can't remember the factor off the top of my head, but it'd be a certain amount of kilograms per liters of CO2 emissions per liter of oil that's being used. And we have, through our home energy assessment program, a model that projects how much energy would be reduced by putting in insulation, for example. So we might say, all right, you're going to be using 150 liters less of oil because you've completed these upgrades, and we just multiply that by an emissions factor for home heating oil. And then we can do the same thing for propane, natural gas, wood. There's two ways to look at wood. One way is considering it carbon neutral, one way is not considering it carbon neutral, so we typically rely on our third-party evaluator to complete that calculation for us.
For folks who are using baseboard electric heat, then when you switch to a heat pump scenario, what it means essentially is they're using a little less coal from Nova Scotia Power. Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Smith?
Yeah, sometimes I hear residents say, well, why would I switch from oil to a heat pump if, not, the grid isn't entirely green? My understanding is it's still more efficient and it produces fewer GHG emissions to use the heat pump than oil. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I used to say the exact same thing years ago myself as well, and this is even more true back not too far in the past. So the current intensity of Nova Scotia Power's, the intensity of their emissions, years ago, I think around the mid-2000s, we were around like 960 grams per kilowatt hour. Now we're down to the high 400s. So we've dropped almost half in about 15, 20 years. That's projected to go even lower because the province has a mandate of achieving 80% renewables by 2030. So there's a lot of efforts underway. Years ago, it was kind of more on par. Now it is better to put in a heat pump than to use oil, and that'll get better and better every year as we continue to green the grid.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move down to our Recreation Department, and I believe our Director, Trudy Payne, is going to talk to us about the Pine Grove Park and what we heard report.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and Council. This morning's report will focus on the Pine Grove Park and specifically the What We Heard report. So I'll give you a little bit of an executive summary or background. As Council can recall, at the January 14th, 2025 meeting, Council provided staff direction to essentially go out and do a public consultation concerning the Pine Grove Park. That public consultation was held on February 25th, 2025, here in the municipal chambers, in which we had a good number of folks turn out to that public engagement session. At that session, we posed 6 questions, and we had enough staff that basically there was one staff person stationed at each of the questions. We were capturing the responses of folks. They also had the opportunity to fill out on the flip chart or on sticky notes and add that to the conversation. We also posted the 6 questions on our Engage site, in which we had a few folks go and comment on those 6 questions as well. So the What We Heard report is a compilation of what we heard that night on February 25th, but also the responses that were received to those 6 questions online. The 6 questions that were posed was, how would you like to see the property used? And we gave some examples to prompt. For example, become a vacant lot, such as removing all the park features, sell as a residential lot, remain as a park, but we asked folks to fill in any of the blanks. How did or do you use the park? What were or are the current challenges in the park? And what are the things you love or loved about the park? And what features would you like to see in the park? And what features would you not like to see in the park? So from the responses to this question, it became very evident that the park is a very valuable asset to the community. And at one point in time, it was used greatly when all the park features were intact. The major concerns that were expressed both in person and online was around vandalism, the upkeep of the park, and safety. Although not reflected in the report, what we found is when some of those features that were highly used at one point in time removed due to safety concerns or direction from insurance, the use of the park went down. It's been my experience working in this field for a number of years is that when parks are well used, vandalism is often down, and when parks are not well used, vandalism is up. And I think that's probably what we're seeing here. The top features that scored the highest, and I looked at anything that was 10 or over to get some kind of comparison, were hands down were the multi-rink and multi-purpose surface. That was often used in the wintertime as a skating rink for hockey, for a number of things. And during the off-season or the non-winter season, you would see children with scooters and different wheeled versions using that multi-purpose or playing, I want to say field hockey, but it's like street hockey. The basketball courts, and those were removed. The soccer and the sport field, so that grassy area that folks could go and kick a ball and do a number of things at. The playground equipment, there is some playground equipment that's remaining, but some was removed due to CSA standards. One of the new things that did come up is that folks wanted, and I suspect this came from the security aspect, was they would like to see video cameras and security cameras, so that if perhaps some activity is happening there that's not supposed to, we can more address it through the video cameras, and it may deter people from doing such activity. Lighting for the evening so that it could be, the use could be expanded. And the splash pad was the one that ranked number 10. So as council is aware, this park has been in our park system since 2012. It became a park when a number of community members approached council about entering into a management agreement. Council agreed, and we had been into a management agreement with the Pine Grove Outdoor Play Association up until the fall of 2022. During that time frame, a number of volunteers worked very hard to build up the park and put those features in. The number one feature, maybe that's why it's ranked the highest, the first feature that they put in there was the multi-purpose court. And it became really known as the secret place for skating. For those of you, I know that you all know that our winters are not the same, especially when I was a kid. The winters has dramatically changed, and so quite often, the Mark would provide an outdoor skating rink as well, but because it's a pond and it has a deeper depth, often the last few years we haven't been able to even provide that. So with the outdoor rink at the Pine Grove, you're talking, not that big of a depth that has to be frozen, and if you do go through, you're not going into a pond. So that, I think that's part of the reason why it became quite popular, and of course over the years they added a number of features like the basketball, the playground equipment, the splash pad, the gazebo, the lending library, etc. In 2022, the community group had, I think the members that were serving were quite exhausted, and they did make 2 attempts. There was 2 public meetings held here in the municipal chambers to try to recruit new volunteers and members to serve on the board. And unfortunately, that was unsuccessful, so they handed the keys back to the municipality. The municipality did not open the park in 2023, but gave direction to staff in July to bring it at a safe space so that it could be used for passive recreation. So that's what was done last year, and it would be our intent to open the park again this year during the long weekend, as we do many of our other parks. And primarily for this season, it would be used for passive recreation. So unless people have specific questions around the What We Heard report, just to conclude, it was very high numbers that people want to keep it to remain as a park, have very similar features like it did in the past, is a very valuable community neighborhood park. And I think since COVID particularly, I think the value of parks have really increased in people's lives than before. When you had limited spaces to go, but one of those spaces that you could go during COVID was in parks and outdoors and trails, I think the value to people really increased. So if there's particular questions, I'll try my best to address them.
Councillor Brooks?
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Just a quick question. Are there barbecue pits there, or were there ever barbecue pits there?
Not to my knowledge, there was no barbecue.
Was that something that was voiced at all as an interest by constituents?
Not that we heard, it did not come up.
Okay. And are people allowed to barbecue there if they brought their own?
If they brought their own barbecue, I don't think we could do anything to stop it because it'd be hard to enforce. I would just ask that people respect the provincial and municipal regulations, particularly around that.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Burns.
Thank you. I have a question and then a couple thoughts, if I may. So I will start with the question. I know we have I think it's about 10 grand sitting there. For more of the immediate concerns around security, would it be possible to come up with any options that we might use some of those funds to have a camera that might work? Or I know there's some issues with cell service, and that's part of why we don't have one there. But is there any option to use any of that to maybe alleviate or help fight some of the vandalism that may be occurring in the park, to put any cameras or anything?
I guess what I would say, that would be the direction of council. Because the original motion did say to come back with a what you heard report and an options report. Then I think it was the January 23rd meeting, I'm going by memory now, where council made the decision that they wanted to take a much more focused, planned approach around parks, and directed staff to come back with evaluation criteria. And I believe at that time, council made the decision not to move forward with certain projects, Pine Grove being one of them. So that was very long-winded, but I take my direction from council. So if council wanted staff to look at options around security cameras, I know we also have a policy, so we would have to, I'd have to talk to our CAO around that. But you are quite correct. There are funds that are available, and looking at the security cameras and looking at other options could be a short gap for this season, because it is a park that is open to the public, unlike the other projects that we were discussing, which would be the Sherbrooke Lake, the Maliga Lake Boat Launch, and Oxnard's Beach.
You had other questions, Councillor Burns?
Question and thought, it will kind of tie into this. So, I mean, I also wanted to say thank you to everyone involved in this, because it was one of the first things I did as a councillor here that people asked from the campaign, and it was actually, it was a very positive night. It was, for what is a community-specific issue, largely, it brought a lot of people out with a lot of positive energy, and anyone in the room there, I think, would back me up on that. It really was, it was rather uplifting, actually. So I wanted to thank everyone who came out. What I wanted to say is, what we have there right now does not serve the residents in proportion to the amount of time and energy we as a municipality have to put into in maintaining the park or keeping it safe. So I am very realistic in that I'm not looking for something this year to change. I would ask that at some point we do consider some security cameras or an option, and I think that's something that should probably come back at another time. I'll speak with the appropriate people to get that in motion in an appropriate manner. But I think that using some of the funds there as a stopgap to at least address some of the concerns around, for lack of a better term, security, vandalism, would be an appropriate thing to do. I know we're going to look at our park strategy, our open space strategy. We're going to be looking at things in a more holistic way as we look across the municipality at what the needs are and allocate there. And I know that this park isn't the only one that's people will ask for some investment in. Like, well aware of that. But what I would ask at this time, just from council, is just an earnest openness to consider some form of investment in this park that will set it on a path to be sustainable and be used sustainably, instead of every couple of years batting forth between people wanting something, it not happening, changing function, not changing function. I would like to set this up, right? If I do one thing at council specifically for Pine Grove, it would be to have this question answered in a way that people can then move forward with it. And so I'd ask you to just, as we move forward with our strategy, please be open to a revitalization and an investment that will make this park sustainable, especially given in the area here. This is one of the areas we've targeted for large amounts of growth. There will be large amounts of growth in this area, and having that park there, I can tell you as a parent, having infrastructure in place to take your kids that's not on a school ground, and especially as a dad, you don't always want to show up to a school during school hours with your kids. it would be a fantastic thing in the community. I think it would make a big difference. I think it would make a big difference in the summers for a lot of people as they're looking for things to do with their kids. So I would just ask that everyone be open to that with the strategy when it comes time for the discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
I have a question about security cameras at other parks. Do we currently have any kind of program for, with security cameras for keeping an eye on parks?
We don't. We have used security cameras in the past. We've borrowed them from the Municipal Joint Services Board when we were having issues at Saw Pit Wharf. And we only had them posted up for 2 weeks, and it proved very beneficial in finding the person that was basically leaving garbage there at 2 o'clock in the morning every week. We would go and see copious amounts. So we've, at a staff level, have started talking about that because we are having an issue at a particular park again. And hands are really tied when you don't have necessarily enforcement officers that go throughout various times of the day. So the security cameras would definitely timestamp that and help with the proof that you're trying to acquire so that you can respond. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
So, and just as a follow-up, I would support us looking into this as a solution for this park, because as it's one of the top concerns, it could go a long way in establishing trust and a feeling that this is not just a problem. And in the meantime, while we're looking at the strategy, it could generate some trust with the community, as I believe that the consultation process did, which I agree with Councillor Burns. It was really, really positive night.
We have Councillor Moore and then Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I agree. We need to, this is not a new park. It's a park that has been around for a long time. And the people in the area are looking for us to do something. I agree that the security thing is going to be the first step to put people's parents' minds at rest, that we are diligent in trying to stop what is happening in another park in this area with paraphernalia that is not garbage. It's garbage, but it's, I won't go into detail, we all know. So I think this is a first step. I think we should look into it. The money is there, the $10,000 is there, and if you want a motion for us to do that, no motion, just direction?
I think right now we'll just hear everybody's questions and we'll let Alex think about how we should do that.
Okay, I'll stay on hold.
Okay, Councillor Brooks?
Just supporting what Councillor Moore said, I think this is really one for us to act on. The money's there. It doesn't require a shift of stuff. Let's show people that even if we can't go further this year, it's a commitment to this. And I know we have some cameras that move around with the Public Works, so some of those are shareable. I don't know if that's something we would want to entertain even for a short period of time, but some signage alone regarding some cameras and some monitoring, I think could be a helpful first step. But I really would like to support this and let people know we're going to start things, we're securing the property, even if it's going to take us a minute to fully develop it, we're showing the commitment to the community. So I would absolutely support this, going back to staff to say, let's find a direction for this.
I do have a question regarding the vandalism. If we were to put cameras in, I believe most everything is taken out of that park, so what is being vandalized that cameras would need to be there for?
I can speak from some of the things that I've seen in the park, as well as some of the photos and different things that different residents have shown me. There's various contraceptives that regularly appear at the park that are some of the main photos that people send to me, but there's also a deal of some fire setting, and some of the things have been taken out of the park because small fires have been set. I wouldn't suggest to you that it's always at one specific time, and I think it's just something that happens due to the nature of it being an area where it's a bit easier to be off the road and get up to shenanigans. And sometimes shenanigans turn into things that are more shenanigans, and I think that would be more the concern that people have in the area. So something to stop them while we would say they're shenanigans and not something more is a positive way to view that.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you. I just want to go on the record as supporting the conversation around the table here. And maybe we could ask the Recreation Department to look at it and see what can be done and come back in a future date with a report on their recommendation and maybe share that with Councillor Burns before it's presented to council. Thank you.
Alex, do you have any thoughts on how we would proceed?
Well, I think that's an appropriate suggestion from Councillor Bell. At this time, there's a little bit of uncertainty, particularly around the municipality's video surveillance policy. So if you leave it with Trudy's capable hands, she'll come back with some information on your options.
Yeah, I think the conversation is that we act quickly on this, so I would encourage Ms. Payne to do this in short order. Given that the park is going to open on the 16th, I think it would be a very important message to have our residents know that this is under surveillance now, and that we're ready when the park is ready to be opened. And I just want to put my voice to this. I think it is a step while we work through the future plans for the park to make sure that we're responding, and I think this is a reasonably easy step to take.
And I believe we don't need a motion for that. It would just be direction. So you've received direction. Or does it need to be more specific?
Staff, if I may, staff have talked about what could be done in the short term to make that a more active park for very little effort. So we have thought about that. So I think we could probably get a report back relatively quickly. And as Councillor Burns has pointed out, there is funds, and we may actually be able to leverage funds from another funding source that might help as well. So,
Councillor Moore.
One more. We have a security camera policy?
yes, you do.
Okay, good to know. I'm wondering maybe, through staff to you, when you come back, if we could have that policy in front of us so that we can start looking at long-term of all our parks. Because nobody, if things are going sideways in one or two parks, it's not going to be long and they're going to be in all our parks. So maybe something that we could look at a line budget in the future for all our parks.
Go ahead.
One of the intentions of the policy is to make sure that you're respecting the privacy of individuals. And so your policy states that video surveillance is a last resort where other options for deterrence have been unsuccessful. So we would recommend you don't pursue a blanket approach of video surveillance. This might be a situation where it warrants it, but I don't want to speak out of turn. We'll let Trudy have a peek at the policy and bring back a report just for this particular property.
Go ahead, Councillor Moore.
I understand that completely now that it's explained to me, but it could be problem-based. If there is a problem in the park, we can come back and get it addressed. Say there was drug failure or something like that that's in a park, we could come back and have it addressed through staff.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so are we on the understanding that Trudy has a direction regarding cameras and other things that could be in the park? Thank you. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to be starting in about a minute, everybody. Welcome back. And we are going to continue on with our agenda. And I believe our director, Trudy Payne, is going to continue on with the Community Recreation Capital Grant.
So thank you, Council. The report before you is staff is bringing forth a recommendation asking Council to consider Okay, now that we're not having that echo in the background, I'll continue. Yes, so I'm here before you today with a recommendation for council to consider allocating an additional $20,000 towards the Community Recreation Capital Grant Program for this fiscal year. So to give you a little bit of background, the Community Recreation Capital Grant has been around as long as I've been around and probably before me. And typically, we have always budgeted $20,000 for this funding. And typically, it has always been sufficient amounts, or we've actually underspent in the past. In 2023, council went through quite a big review of our grants policy, and one of the grants that was changed at that time was the Community Recreation Capital Grant. So to give you a little bit of background, in order for a nonprofit community group to apply, they could only apply once every 24 months, and the most that they could apply for was $1,000. In January of 2023, the policy was updated, which included the Community Recreation Capital Grant. And what was changed with that particular grant was that community groups would no longer have to wait 24 months. Part of the rationale behind waiving that 24 months is that we have a large number of community groups that do own facilities, whether they're outdoor facilities or indoor facilities, and undoubtedly you usually have some small capital program or project that needs to be done. What wasn't changed was the major recreation capital grant. It remained at, well, actually, you used to be able to only access $10,000 from that, and that was also increased to $15,000. But the 24 months was kept to try to spread the larger projects over a larger number of community groups. And the reason why it was increased from 1,000 to 2,000, during COVID, we saw numbers really increase for materials and labor. And the $1,000 had been there for like a long time. It hadn't changed. And so that's why council made the decision to wait to enable groups to apply annually and to have the increase to $2,000 because of cost. So this fiscal year that just passed is the first time that we ran out of money in February. It was the first time we had ever ran out of money. And we're now really only into a month and a week into this fiscal year, and I have pretty much allocated most of the funds for projects that are small capital. Perhaps I should have had better hindsight and included this in the 25-26 budget, but trying to be very conscious of budget, and we came back several times trying to get to a surplus. But I am here asking because we pretty much spent, I've got 2 applications on my desk that would completely expend it for this year, and I anticipate that there might be more. And as I put in the report, there's 2 reasons I think there might be increase, and this is just speculation, I don't have any hard data, is that 3 years ago we started with a grant workshop. And we've done that in January of every year, so this would have been the 3rd one this January. Typically, we've had over 60-some people. Some are repeats, but in the last 3 years, I've seen a lot of different groups as well. So I think more groups are becoming more familiar with what grant programs that we have. And with 2023 being the first year with it being changed, I think groups maybe weren't as aware that they could apply annually and that the amount has increased. So I think that was part of the reason why we ran out of money in February and why we've seen an increase in applications so early. And plus we are getting into the spring where people do capital work. So that's really the long story short. Community groups provide copious amounts of services in our communities. They are a significant part of the recreation, health, social services that are provided. Without them, municipalities would probably be asked to do more. And this is just my opinion. When we provide to community groups, we're investing in our communities. It's not going in their own personal pockets. It's going to provide services or to improve facilities that are available to the community. And one of our main criteria is they do have to be a nonprofit group and what they're providing for the community benefit. And that's all I'll say, and if there's any questions, I'll try my best to address them.
Before we do the questions, we'll have the motion on the floor, because I'm sure the questions will also regarding the motion. Councilor Brooks, since you put your hand up, would you be willing to bring that motion?
To Mayor McLean, Weil, and members of the council, I move that the Finance Committee recommends to the council that the Municipal Council provide up to $20,000 in additional funding to the Community Recreation Capital Grant Program for the 2025-2026 fiscal year, and further that it come from the general operating reserves.
And a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Burns. And discussion on the motion. And Councilor Brooks, you had a question?
Ms. Payne, could you just give me a few examples of some of the grant, how it's directed? Some folks who've received some of this money?
I certainly can. So the Baker Settlement Community Hall, they're replacing their outdoor door to their furnace. The Barces Corner Community Hall, they're replacing flooring and doing interior paint. Parkdale Maplewood, their cooler went in their hall and it was like an emergency. They offer, if you've never been there, they offer great breakfast at the community hall, so it's very important. And so they were able to replace their cooler. I just got a picture this week of the cooler, and I think they lost like $600 worth of food when the cooler went. The Simpsons Corner Community Hall is replacing their side doors. The Upper Northfield Community Hall, the hot water tank replacement. So this is like some examples of things that might cost like, $3 to $5, is anything under $10,000, that's part of our criteria. And then sometimes there are emergencies and sometimes there are these smaller projects. I believe one year we, funded a group that was replacing their wheelchair accessible ramp. So it's really for those smaller types of projects that anybody that owns a home understands there's usually some small capital repairs. So those are the types of groups.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the Parkdale Maplewood situation with the cooler, because I think that really demonstrates how it's important to have some money on hand, because, they do their monthly breakfasts, and to go without a cooler is a huge problem and has quite an impact on the community if there isn't a way to quickly recoup funds or seek a grant. So I would support having money in the fund going forward, because if it's totally depleted, we can't. I assume then you would have to bring every request to council to be approved, and I don't think that that's a very good use of time.
Yeah, or council just simply direct me not to just say we have no money. That's the other option. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the floor? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. And are you staying there for the others? Awesome.
You get to hear me all at once. So the next report that's before you is concerns the annual operating and the major recreation capital grants. Is it not on? Oh, I can display the chart. Yeah, so if... Yeah, you surely can. Yeah, so while Alex is dealing with the technology, so I'm here to speak about the annual operating major recreation capital grants. This is part of our grants policy as well. So again, a little bit of background. These grants have been in existence for quite some time. And according to our grant policy, the deadline each year is March the 1st. So any groups that want to apply for this funding, this is the only 2 grants in our grant program system that has deadline. And we budget usually around $150,000 each year. Sometimes groups ask us for carryovers, so we budget allowing for those carryovers if they haven't finished a project in the year that they receive funding. So this year we budgeted $165,000, and accounting for the carryovers, and Elena allows us to get things in by the end of April. So sometimes if somebody submits their grant final report, say April the 3rd or April the 20th, we're still able to funnel that money through the previous year. So at the end of the day, once we did the carryover and everything, we had $156,744 to possibly disperse between the annual operating and the major recreation capital grant. We do, according to the policy, we will entertain late applications, but only if there are any funds remaining. And typically, I do bring forth a recommendation that utilizes all the money, but this year you will see that there is a recommendation that there's a small surplus. That's just simply because of the criteria that we used and the percentages. It worked out with a bit of a surplus, but we also do have one late application, 2 other folks that have inquired. And as in the past, when those funds are depleted, we have had community groups come and make a presentation asking council for additional money. The one that comes to mind is the New Elm Church, where we had expended all of our money. I believe that was last year or the year before, and they came and made a special presentation. So council did approve funding from their contingency fund. So looking, with part of this recommendation is allowing for some additional funds in case we do have some applications that council wishes to consider. We did have a little less applications, believe it or not, after I did just talk about the Community Recreation Capital Grant going, the increases. This year, we had 43 people apply, or groups apply, under the annual operating grant, requesting an amount of $172,363. And this is a decline from last year. We received 51 applications last year compared to 43, and the request last year was just over 200,000. For the Major Recreation Capital Grant, we received 8 applications, and so the amount that was requested in total was $84,458, and last year we had 14 applications. Last year, we had 14 new groups apply, and this year we only had 4 new groups apply. But again, with the grant workshops over the last 3 years, I anticipate that the new groups might decline. So as every year, there's more requests than the funds that are available, and this year it wasn't any different. This year, the request totaled $258,321. That includes the late application. And what we have to provide is $156,744. So the applications were reviewed based on criteria. Council has some of those criteria outlined in their policy in the budget available. So after using the criteria, there was 2 of us that used this criteria, and for the most part, we were, a certain percentage point within each other. We did the average of the 2. So if somebody ranked, let's say, using the criteria at 80%, we would reduce the 20% and get to a number. And I did this, and it was over the $156,744. And so then what was applied in most cases, and I do say in most cases because I will use the hike group, for example, they asked for $500. If I had to use that formula, they would have been getting significantly less. And sometimes there's some have to be objective, but sometimes you have to bring the understanding of the group and being subjective. What they were asking for wasn't a significant amount, so you'll notice that I'm recommending $500 for them. But for the majority of cases, once we used the criteria, did the deduction, in order to arrive at a number that fit within the budget, we looked at taking an additional 20% from those groups that were in the municipality of the District of Lunenburg. We looked at groups that provide a regional service, so just not to MODL, but to all of Lunenburg County or Lunenburg Queens, took an additional 25% off. And then those that were, not saying that our residents don't go to these community groups or use these services, but primarily based out of another municipality besides MODL, we took an additional 30% off. So that's how we arrived at the numbers. So if the funds are approved, it will leave $4,684 to possibly fund any late applications. I've included as part of the report a brief description of each one of the groups that applied for both the annual operating and the Major Recreation Capital Grant. I put the amount that they requested and the amount that's being recommended. So unless council wants me to go through that, I can tell you that every year it is a trial. You look at the criteria, you look at the numbers, and look at the services. Is it a perfect science? No. But we do have really good working relationships with these groups and have an understanding of what services that they do provide. So if there's any questions, I will, again, try to do my best to address them. I didn't bring the actual grant applications in. I probably should have, but I can run out and get it if I need to address a particular question that I don't have the answer in front of me.
We had gotten the list in our agenda package, so before we do put the motion on the floor, were there any particular grants that members of council had questions regarding? Councillor Smith.
Just a general question. This is my first time going through this process. Obviously, some organizations will have the ability to draw funds from other places. So how is that weighted when you're comparing organizations that, you know, this may be one of their only places to draw funding from versus ones that have many other options?
So we do have one of the criteria is can you leverage other funding, and we do give points towards that. Because most groups, there are some, probably like cemeteries would be ones that comes to mind that is the most limiting. For the most part, there are other funding sources that community groups could access, and that is one of the services the rec department provides. So one of the things when we do our grants workshop, I'll just say, I'm here to talk about the municipality district of Lunenburg grants, but we also can help navigate you through the grant system. So if somebody was doing a significant repair to a community hall, I do know that there's recreation facility development grant. There's the community facility program through the province. There's the New Horizons grant through federal government. Efficiency Nova Scotia, has funding for halls and for if you're retrofitting into going from oil to heat pumps. Like I believe Tancook received 80% of their funding from Efficiency Nova Scotia when they switched to heat pumps. So we do look at, are you only using us as your only source when there could be other sources as well? So to flip that around as well. So we do, again, I say it's not perfect science, but we do look at all that.
Councillor Reinhardt.
Thanks. I was just wondering about if you could explain more about the Pride Lunenburg, because it looks like they didn't get operating funding because they applied for a major event grant.
So for some of our grants, you can apply for more than one if you're applying for different things. So let me use an example. You could apply for a major recreation capital grant, which some have in this situation, to put heat pumps in. But you could also apply for an annual operating grant because it helps with your annual cost. What you can't do is apply for two different funding sources for the same program or project. And that's essentially when I went and spoke with Ruth, that's when I discovered that the Pride group had applied for the major event, which is for Pride Week, and this is exactly what they had applied for annual operating. So if they had have applied for annual operating for other than something for Pride Week, some of the other things that they were doing, then it probably, so this is where it, so essentially they were applying for the same thing, two grants. That's the same like as we said for community events. You can't apply for a major event grant and apply for a community event grant for the same exact event. It has to, and so that's when it becomes a bit challenging.
Could someone please put the motion on the floor? Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. To the chair and members of the Finance Committee, I move that the Finance Committee recommends to Council that Municipal Council approve the applications for the 2025-2026 Annual Operating Grant Program in the amount of $99,701 as presented, and I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Moore. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Vino, Councillor Smith, thank you.
Just another question about, I was talking with someone from a community organization last night, and they said, you know, we get the money that they offer us, but I have no idea where that comes from. and I assume that you have conversations with people all the time about how you arrive at the numbers. So can people contact you and say, I would like more information about how things were weighted and how the calculation was made?
They absolutely can. And I would definitely be open to that conversation. And also in our grant policy, if they looked at our grant policy, it lists a number of the evaluation criteria that we use. So we try to be very upfront about, and the questions that we pose in the application would indicate too what we're evaluating on. So when we ask, we specifically say, will this money help leverage other dollars? When they say no, that should be an indication that that's something that we're looking for, but absolutely, they can certainly give us a call and ask us how we arrive at those numbers.
Any other questions? Mayor McLean-Weil?
It is a comment, and it does relate to both this motion and the other motion we're going to see, and that's around the deadline and the deadlines that we set. I feel that we should follow those and not make exceptions, because we have 99% or 95%, whatever the percentage is, of our applicants recognize the date and meet the date, the deadline. You're doing workshops that clearly outline what those deadlines are, and I think in fairness, then it's clear that what monies you have, and you're not squirreling money aside to cover some eventuality that may come up. So that's one point. The second point is that I feel that the details and the explanation you've offered around, and we have a very detailed policy around the criteria that we use, that you use, staff use, to allocate the monies, also the process that you've just outlined in terms of the detail, the allocation you do for points and then averaging. It is a rigorous process. And I feel that we are because I've asked some other municipalities about this at the meeting last week at Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities around this. We are way ahead of many in terms of the process used in making these decisions. I don't think, I trust staff with the policy that we have to do this work without having to bring this back to council. We could have it for information, and we should know who, particularly in districts, who is getting money. But I don't think this is something that we need to be spending time on at a council meeting. I think we can receive this as information. I think that's important. But we've got a lot of work on our agenda, and we should be letting the staff that are qualified to do this do their job and not meddling too much in that. I put that out as, I would like a little conversation around that. It's something that I think it helps us as a council identify where our time needs to be and the level of trust and respect we have for staff decisions around some of these issues, particularly when we have a very detailed policy. If we didn't have a detailed policy, then I would say yes, but with this, I think there is reason to think that we should receive this as information only.
What I'd like to do first, before you comment on what is, we'll just handle the motion that's presently on the floor. And then if we want to entertain a new motion or further discussion, then we can do so when we won't have everything confused. So we have it, the motion's on the floor, and it's been seconded. All those in favor? Motion's carried. So go ahead.
Did you want to put the second motion on the floor, or you want me to comment first?
Yeah, why don't we do that, and then we'll go back to have a further discussion on the points that the mayor has made. So could I have someone put the second motion on the floor that we have, Councillor Moore? Thank you.
To Mayor McLean Wall and members of council, I move that the Finance Committee recommend to council that municipal council approve the applications for the 2025-2026 Major Recreation Capital Grant Program in the amount of $52,359 as presented, and further that the South Shore Multicultural Society application being contingent on securing storage space. And I so move.
And seconded by Deputy Mayor Vino. Any discussion or questions regarding this particular motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. So we'll go now to discuss, there's two things that the mayor brought forward. One was regarding late applications, and the other one was regarding just receiving the grant information rather than having to go through this process each time. And Trudy, would you like to comment on that before we give it to council?
I just want to comment on the deadline. Previously, the policy was that was the firm deadline. And then council made the decision to change it to maintain it to March the 1st, but put the caveat that late applications would only be considered if there were no funds left. And that was simply because sometimes you're dealing with volunteers, and volunteers change over time, and sometimes for whatever reason they were unable to get it in for March the 1st. So that's why I just want to give you the background. Not to debate it, but just to give you the background that it used to be that way. This is why it changed, and then obviously this is a new council. It can have its discussions about that, but I want to give the background.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Vino?
Yeah, outside of my council duties, I'm on 5 boards, and what I'm seeing with all of them is the decline in volunteers, changing in officers, new responsibilities, and sometimes those late applications do come because of your volunteers and not being aware of deadlines and what have you. And I would like to continue to see us accepting late applications if the funds are there. I'm not saying that we should come up with new money, but if we have leftover funds to use that amount, I'd like to see that continue.
Councillor Hubley?
I have 2 points. I agree with Deputy Mayor Vino. I would like to see us consider the late applications as well, just because, like Trudy stated, it's based on volunteers, and I know how busy volunteers are. I also agree with Mayor McLean Weil that we as a council, the previous council set the criteria for the operating grant, and we need to trust staff to do their job. I agree, it does not need to come back to us. Information purposes only is fine.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you. I agree with the fact that we've set the criteria, and it should be easy for staff to fill a role. I know at FCM, the discussion was some municipalities in Ontario are using AI to do this. Council puts in the categories of, we want this, these are the qualifying things, and they're finding that they can get their answer done up in 20 minutes for an entire year. So surely to go out with the professional staff that we have, they can do it, taking whatever time is required. But I am somewhat preferring to set a deadline, a scheduled time. If there's money left and applications come in after that, they should be at a different weighted value. I think guidelines are set to help staff be able to make a management decision on what their recommendation is. And we've set datelines for, like, our fire departments when they file their applications and so on, for trying to be in before the annual meeting and before we recognize them as partners. So while some organizations do have staff changes, I really do think that we have to look at a deadline, meaning a deadline. And if you do exceed that or miss it, if we want to acknowledge and accept it, it should be at a different weighted level. Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I was just talking to some folks about deadlines recently around these applications, and two organizations noted that our deadline is March 1st.
Change it, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday, it's March the 1st. You have till midnight that
Yeah.
night to get it to us.
So these organizations were saying, you know, they're volunteer organizations, lots of older people in these groups. They do not meet by Zoom, and we know what the roads were like in February this year, like impassable in some areas. So they really struggled to meet as boards and get the applications out. And I wonder if that's why we saw fewer applications this year, just because people struggled to get together to get the work done. That's total, just wondering. But, you know, a lot of these organizations have staff, and many don't. And it's not really fair to hold them to the same standard, I don't think, if we're wanting to support community infrastructure like our halls. So I would support us remaining flexible, and if the deadline is missed and there's money available, I say we consider those applications, especially if there are considerations like bad roads in the weeks leading up to the application.
Are any other thoughts? So, Mayor?
I do have a motion that I could put on the floor, which deals more with the approval authority as opposed to the deadline. So, and I'll table that to the Chair of the Finance Committee and Council, that Council directs staff to amend Policy 043, Community Grants Program Sponsorship Request, by changing the approval authority from Council to staff for the annual operating, major events, and major recreation capital grants, and bring back proposed amendments for consideration to Policy and Strategy Committee. I so move.
And seconded by Councillor Hubley. Are there any other questions? Alex, do you have any comment on that particular motion? Was it perfect?
It sounds reasonable if the committee wants to support that, asking for the right thing, which is staff to bring back possible amendments.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Trudy. And I believe Abhi is going to be talking to us about Crescent Beach.
Good morning, everyone. I'm presenting on a funding request from Friends of Crescent Beach, who is hoping to work on a climate risk and adaptation study for the Crescent Beach. Bit of a background. Actually, before that, I also want to highlight or flag that the report that was included in Council agenda, we received some new information over the weekend, and that was since the agenda was already published, and so we have new funding recommendation, which I will speak to later. Bit of a background: the Friends of Crescent Beach, who has been actively stewarding coastal island or wetlands or beaches since the 1980s, and their work includes dune restoration, signages, public cleanups, and liaising with the province on beach managements. The group presented to Municipal Council in the month of February, on February 11th, about increasing vulnerability of Crescent Beach, and especially after Hurricane Lee, where they highlighted how the Crescent Beach has experienced repeated storm damage for over a century. And dune systems, which used to be once continuous, have been degraded over time, and now only 25% of the beach, or actually 25% of the beach is now without dunes, and some existing armor rock is no longer effective. And now they are looking for new science-based approaches that for the long-term solution. And the group has proposed a study that will assess flood and erosion risks. They will also model sea level rise and identify what are the best shoreline adaptation options moving forward. And their original proposal was an estimated $250,000 for the total project cost or for the feasibility study, and they had originally requested $50,000 from MODL, which was full 20% required non-provincial contribution for their Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund application. There were two points that were raised during that council meeting. One was around the funding thing, and the council had asked if the group would be willing to consider fundraising a portion of that required match, and the group responded positively, and they followed up with staff and confirmed that they would be willing to raise $20,000 and requested $30,000 comes from MODL. So that is how the staff report that came to council agenda was prepared. Now, speaking of new information, over the weekend that we received, they provided an updated numbers on their budget. Now, because they now have officially submitted their full SCCF application as of April 22nd, which was post their EOI approval, expression of interest approval, and now since they have submitted full application, they were able to have some detailed costing around the budget. And now the project is estimated to cost around $242,145, and part of which they have already raised $23,800 through in-kind contributions. And based on this updated budget, the group has reduced their request from modal to $20,000 from their initial $30,000. And they also confirmed that they will act as a project lead with the same project partners, which is going to be CBCL Engineering, Coastal Action, St. Mary's University, and CB Wetlands and Environmental Specialists. And in addition to clarifying the budget and the project details, the group also secured a letter of support from the Department of Public Works, which is the landowner of the beach, and the letter is also attached to the staff report in the agenda. In regards to strategic focus, staff believes that the study aligns with two of Council's strategic priorities, which is climate change action and the quality of life, since it supports climate resilient planning, while at the same time it also helps preserve much loved public space that is used for recreation and coastal enjoyment. Speaking of budget, under the updated recommendation now, MODL would contribute $20,000, and the funding drawn equally from two reserves. One would be open space operating reserves, where the $10,000 would come from, and recognizing as the project protects a recreational asset. And $10,000 would come from sustainability reserve, given its focus on climate adaptation. In regards to communications focus, MODL support will be acknowledged in project materials, and staff also recommends working with FOCB, which is Friends of Crescent Beach, to share updates through our communication channels to keep the public informed as the study progresses. In regards to work plan, minimal staff time is expected. A point of contact could be our sustainability person, as in like myself, who could be a liaison between the FOCB team and Modal. As for alternative options, Council may either choose to approve a lesser contribution if they would like, such as $15,000 or so. Second option could be Council could decline the funding request, which would mean that the group will have to secure the full required match from other funding sources. In conclusion, staff strongly recommends that given this is a community-driven proposal that addresses clear climate risks and supports local stewardship and protects a valuable public recreational asset. It aligns with MODL's climate as well as the quality of life strategic focus. And should council supports the request, the recommended revised motion reads as that the Finance Committee recommends to Council to provide $20,000 to support the feasibility and option study regarding climate risk mitigation and to the Friends of Crescent Beach, and with the funds coming from open space and sustainability operating reserves. And further that the funding is contingent upon the group receiving a grant from the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund. I'm happy to take any on questions if you have.
Well, we'll put the motion on the floor first, and then we'll have questions. Councilor Reinhardt, would you be willing to put this motion on the floor?
Sure.
Thank you.
To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that the Finance Committee recommends to council that municipal council provide $20,000 to support a feasibility and options study regarding climate risk mitigation to the Friends of Crescent Beach, with the funds coming from the open space and sustainability operating reserves. And further, that municipal funding is contingent on Friends of Crescent Beach receiving a grant from the Provincial Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund. And I so move.
And seconded by Councilor Bell. Are there any questions? Mayor McLean-Weil?
I just, and they may have answered it when they were here and I forget, so excuse me if I'm asking the same question again, but the provincial government has a redevelopment plan for Rissers Beach, and they're looking long-term at what that park would look like, and seeing that it's very close and abuts onto the same, basically, beach area, although it is a bit different, but in the same area. I just wonder if there's any coordination between that department and this project in terms of looking at what the impact on that whole area is, because there are specific needs at Crescent, clearly with the dunes and the armor rock that was placed there, but the whole impact on that coastal area seems to would benefit from this study as well. Was there any consideration and discussion about that?
Specifically, I think I'm not aware if there is a departmental coordination, but what I am aware is the consultant who did a study for the Rissers Beach was the CBCL, who's the same consultant involved for this project. And there's certainly going to be an experienced firm who is going to do the same work on the Crescent Beach. And the solutions recommended by the studies, now the department is looking at implementing those solutions. But speaking of directly, if it is the same department or there is a different departments, and if there is a coordination, I'm not specifically aware of that.
Certainly.
If I may, I think it is a little unusual, the history of Crescent Beach, in that it's in the property of Public Works. And there's a lot of history there that we don't need to go into today, but it seems to me that this would be really important to try to foster those relationships. And I know sometimes intergovernmental, interdepartmental coordination is a problem, and particularly with some departments. And I would hope that we could see some of that kind of coordination happen, because I think long-term, these are going to be issues that the park is going to be affected by, and we all, people use Crescent, they also use Rissers Beach, and it all seems to fit together. So I hope what knowledge we gain from the project could be also applied more broadly to some of our other coastal areas. So I just leave that as a point, but I think it is important that we not do this in isolation, because there are coastal issues that are going to continue to be part of what we're going to have to deal with as a municipality, and whatever knowledge we can gain shouldn't be thought of in isolation from other problems that we're going to look at.
Are there any other questions? All those in favor? Those opposed? Yeah, opposed by Counselor Brooks. Motion has passed. Oh, pardon? We don't have any other items in our agenda, so am I just allowed to close the meeting without having a motion? And I close this meeting. Just so everybody knows that Crescent Beach is by the province, not